Thanks very much for joining us for the Intermodal Logistics Podcast. I'm Kevin Baxter, and on this edition, we are talking food imports with the head of a global trade association that fosters international food product trade. We welcome Bob Bauer, president of the Association of Food Industries, or AFI. Bob, thanks very much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning.
So, to start with on the topic, let's get in a little bit. We like to do with our guests first to get a little background on them. So tell us about your background and your role as AFI president.
Okay, great. Happy to. Yeah, AFI was formed in 1906. A couple of years ago, I got introduced as one of the founders. I've been around a while, but not since 1906. But I've been with AFI since 1996 and became president in end of 2001. And so our role is, being the voice of the U.S. food import industry. We have a little under 1,000 companies around the world that are members, or either U.S. companies doing the importing of the food, foreign companies shipping the products here, or companies that offer services to either one of those sectors. And, we just view our mission as speaking for and educating anybody involved in the food import sector here in the United States.
Okay, so, and I know that you do kind of as the voice, you do a few different things. So you're advocating on behalf in Washington, right? And then so tell us about the advocacy piece, and also the other piece that really jumped out at me was the standardization and the standards that you are responsible for.
Great. Yeah, those are two good examples. So FSVP, Foreign Supplier Verification Programs, that is one of 7 major rules within the Food Safety Modernization Act that was signed into law in 2011. It actually is a great example of what AFI does, because we heard about that bill before it even included anything but imports, and then it was expanded to become all foods. And so we were doing that advocacy part first, talking to members of Congress, people at FDA, saying this is what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, that sort of thing. And then once it became clear that it was going to be a reality, then our focus shifted to educating people in the industry about it, while still, because there's that whole rulemaking process. So we were educating and getting feedback, providing that feedback to FDA in the comment periods and the like. And then ultimately we shifted, to totally education. And I was fortunate enough to be asked by FDA to be on the task force that developed the training for a foreign supplier verification program through the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance. So I helped develop it. And then we run that program at least monthly. And so I've trained more than 2,000 people on it to date. And that number just, goes up each month. So it's a great example of what it is we're doing. And of course, I'm able, since I interact with importers on a regular basis and FDA people, to interject some things that aren't on the slides. And, this is what's happening in real life kind of thing. This is what FDA is telling me they're finding, stuff like that. So it ends up being a great vehicle to educate. And also the whole process really illustrates a key role for AFI. And then you mentioned the standards. So for about 5 or 6 products, over the years, we've developed quality standards for them. So cashews and Brazil nuts, dried apricots, leaving one out, and we're creating one now from macadamia nuts. And it's just that, they come from various parts around the world. There are buyers here that may be getting conflicting information or buying from various things. So the idea was, let's create standards based on what we know works best for U.S. buyers. And it's been really good for the industry. In fact, usually AFI standards are followed around the world by anybody trading in those products. And I was in a cashew facility overseas not long ago, and the AFI standard is on the wall. I mean, they follow it. So it's really been a good program that the association put together.
Well, so both those things that you talked about, the standards and the Food Safety Modernization Act, they both sort of relate to quality control and safety. And so how important is that in food? I mean, obviously there's a trust factor that's needed, and also if there are problems on this end after something's been imported, it becomes a big problem.
Well, it definitely is. And two other great examples with that. So AFI, we have sections within the organization. And one section is the North American Olive Oil Association. Another one is the National Honey Packers and Dealers Association. And then we have others that are essentially like nuts and dried fruits and pulses, and then one we call processed food. And those are our primary product sections. And olive oil and honey, unfortunately, have had issues over the years with adulteration. And unfortunately, we have to defend those categories as much as we're promoting the categories and promoting what's good about them. Now, the good thing is that the bad thing is that a lot of money is being spent by both sectors. The good news is that what consumers are buying from the supermarkets is what it says it is on the label. So we do random testing through a program we have for olive oil, and less than 2% would be the average over like 25 years or so. Less than 2% of what's available to consumers in a typical supermarket has ever had any problems. And usually it's it's never been a safety problem, usually not an adulteration problem, just the fact that, fluorescent lights like it would to my office, if you display it there, after a while the oil degrades a little bit because light is an enemy of olive oil, light and heat. So those are the problems that we're finding, not so much adulteration. So there was a need for the category to defend itself, and we put that program together. And similar with honey, it could be adulterated with other sugars, and there you have to do at least 2 tests typically to really determine whether or not there's adulteration. But the industry has a program that it put together, and the results are the same. There's what people are buying in the supermarkets is good. So as we see anything like that developing, and it was a similar need for the standards for those products we created, just to create a standard so people could refer to something when they're buying and know that, okay, here's a quality standard we can trust. And the industry has accepted all of them. And if the need arises, we'll create another one, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So obviously every product is a little different, but give us sort of a general idea of the food import process. So bringing something from overseas into the U.S. In kind of a bulk fashion. It's a lot of people don't understand. You wouldn't unless you're in the sector, right? So I'm an importer here in the United States. I have to develop a relationship with an entity I'm looking to buy from. And with that Food Safety Modernization Act, I actually have to go through a whole supplier approval process for them. And in order to do that, I need to look at all of their food safety plan. And I have to not only see what the plan says, but then get documentation to show that it's being carried out. So if it calls for testing at these intervals, I have to get those test results. And I make my assessment of them, and I go through this whole approval process. And then on an ongoing basis, I need to collect all of that documentation. So there's a lot of legwork there. And there's also
I'm taking the risk, the financial risk of bringing that product in there. And that's a key role for for an importer, whether it's food or anything else. So I source the product, and again, it's based on both food safety and quality kind of parameters. I arrange for the product to get here. It gets here. I get paid. Now, I probably had to go through some financing to get the product here. And now it gets here. And now I sell to my customers, and they don't have to worry, right? Because I've taken the risk.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it even gets shipped right to them. And they're good to go. That's why one of the reasons the sector will stick around probably forever, because it just makes life easier for the U.S. users of that product, that someone else not only is doing all of that legwork up front, but they're taking the financial risk of getting the product here.
Yeah.
Which is key. And one of the things I always mention in the FSVP training that I do is, all that food safety assurance kind of stuff that you're doing, and the FDA compliance, and the fact that FDA would inspect me as the importer, I need to promote that to my customers and saying, I'm taking care of all of it. You can get all the documents if you want from me, but it's my responsibility, and I'm the one that's going to be held responsible for the safety of that food. So it's something that the importers are bringing to the table, even more so now that FSMA's in place than they were before.
Yeah. So in terms of the actual modality of shipping, so does most of, for your membership, most of this come through the ports then via cargo ships, shipping lines, that kind of thing?
Yes. Yeah. Most of the stuff that my folks bring in will be shipped here. In food, sometimes fresh produce is aired. It comes by plane. That's a smaller segment within the Association of Food Industries, but the overwhelming majority is going to come in via ship. When the association was formed in 1906, it was all really coming into New York. And that's one of the reasons we're still based here. The food industry still is really concentrated in that New York metro area. But of course, now it's spread out. Something coming from Asia, better chance that it's going to go into one of the ports on the West Coast. But now there's several ports around. And, a couple of years ago, that was another issue that came up. And that was kind of frustrating for a number of reasons. So you had the surge in prices of the shipping, with limited capability to do anything about it, particularly for a smaller entity, because the large companies, they were still getting their stuff on the ships at the expense of the smaller customers who were getting bumped and or being told, well, you can pay us, twice the amount, and maybe we can get you on there, type of thing. So it became frustrating because, obviously for our members who had to pay the additional fees, but even from our perspective, a lot of times an issue comes up, we go to FDA and say, here's the issue, we need to figure something out, and there's a way to get it taken care of. Yeah. In that case, there really wasn't a whole lot, though we were able to go to the FMC, and and they hadn't really thought of food as an issue. One of the commissioners told me, and so we were able to get food on the radar there, and they tried their best to, and they did some good things for everybody in relation to the situation that happened. And some improvements have been made, and still a long way to go. But they did a nice job of trying to help everybody in the sector, and they did realize the impact was greater on smaller entities than on large ones. In fact, we tried to get coalitions going, and larger entities and larger associations wanted nothing to do with it. And after a couple of days of all this outreach, I figured out why. It's because they had the competitive advantage. And it was only when the prices at retail, et cetera, started becoming an issue that they started acknowledging that there was a problem. And that's when it started making, appearing in the general news. Before that, we couldn't get any traction going.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that bottom line price is when people start to react.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about the fact that a lot of food imports are based out or still go through the Northeast. Obviously, few months ago, well, actually, for leading up to throughout last year, we had the worries about the port strike. Actually, kind of happened for a little bit there, like a few hours there and there. How big was that in terms of your membership? Looking at what contingency plans are in place. Fortunately, it ended up not happening in reality, but there already had to be some planning ahead of time, knowing that those deadlines were coming up.
Definitely, and it ends up being a company by company decision on how best to handle it, and it's even similar with the tariff situation. So, some people did make, I hate to use the phrase port shopping because a lot of times. Members of Congress will use it in a disparaging way. But yeah, there was a possibility that there was going to be a strike here, so you had it rerouted. But there were costs involved there. So some said, well, we're not going to do it in case there is no strike because maybe there won't be anything. It'll still be able to come through one of the impacted ports. And we won't have spent any money. Some delayed shipments, sometimes you can. All right, I don't need this right now. And the strike is going to happen, perhaps. Let's wait 2 weeks and have you ship it then, as long as their suppliers were willing to do that. It was okay. So there's so many factors that go into it that it ends up being a company by company decision on how best to handle what's going on, but it all adds to the stress of being in business in this type of business because you just don't know. And a lot of what was being said made it sound for sure that there was going to be a work stoppage for a while too. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, you're kind of rolling the dice, flipping a coin. Will we come out on top or?
Yeah. And the tariffs, again, are a good example. Mm-hmm. Last time around in the Trump administration, when they were announced, and even other times when other presidents had done it, some importers did stock up. But specifically last time around, somebody was telling me a few months ago, I brought in extra stuff. But so did everybody else. Yeah. And then there were no tariffs. And then the prices went down. Mm-hmm. So we ended up losing money because there was an oversupply and we were paying warehousing. She said, I don't care what's going to be announced this time. I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. I'm going to kind of roll the dice and see. And, and this time around, it's even tougher to know what's going on. So a lot of people are taking a more wait and see approach.
Yeah, obviously the tariffs are sort of the elephant in the room as we speak today because it's kind of dominating the news cycle. But obviously, as an organization that deals with imports, you are directly affected by it. So is that kind of the general approach to still sort of a wait and see kind of thing, or probably case by case again as well?
Yeah, from the individual company perspective, most are just taking that wait and see approach and crossing their fingers in some cases because you just don't know. It changes by the minute. From an organizational perspective, it's been for us and other associations I've talked to, both in and out of the food sector, it's tough to chart a course because we don't know what's coming. And our arguments are not going to be different from one another basically our
Yeah.
argument is we don't want tariffs.
Mhm.
So all of us are kind of waiting to see if any of our products are specifically targeted, and then we can pounce, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
until then, a lot of us are just kind of um, making people aware that of the impact of tariffs and the uncertainty that it's been causing and the like, but not being all that aggressive yet. And another reason why not is, and several, I kind of feel the same way, but several people I've talked to, if we make a very good argument about either food in general or specific products, it almost creates leverage for the administration to use against the foreign countries.
Mhm.
Okay, product A, and we made a great argument, and they just turn that argument around and use it. So you want that product, then um, you got to, we need a concession type of thing. So
Uh-huh.
there's that hesitancy for a lot of us to really make strong arguments at this point until we know that our products are targeted.
So, are there particular examples of products that are almost all imported? I mean, obviously, you're talking about you've mentioned nuts and olive oil and things like that. And those seem like they would definitely fit that bill in terms of where most of it's produced.
Yeah, exactly. Olive oil, the olive oil consumed here in the United States, about 2 to 3% is produced here. And they're doing a nice job.
Mm-hmm.
That whole thing, it's quality stuff, but no matter what happens, they will not be able to produce anywhere near where the demand is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the most of it was coming, comes from the EU. It would have been 20% more. Now it's still 10% increase in the tariffs. So 90%, 97% of what is going to be sold there's going to be an increase in that. And I mean, there's an FDA health claim about olive oil and its benefit for heart health.
Yeah.
So now people may have, they may decide, okay, now it's just too expensive. I'm going to go with a lesser oil, and it's not going to be healthy, and it won't taste as good either. But so that is one example. And then, particularly with food, nuts can be a good example. So the argument that all of a sudden manufacturing is going to come back to the United States. And when you get in agriculture, well, now you're talking about having to grow the product as well. And even kind of when the local movement, was bigger in the news. So use almonds, for example. The California industry in almonds, they're doing great. They make a lot of money, which is great. Good product and the whole thing. Well, so these tariffs are going into play. Are they going to cut back? Are they going to take out some of their almond acreage where they know is producing and plant something else that will take several years to start producing?
Yeah.
And very likely not at the rate that they are producing now with almonds, which is on a trajectory that continues to grow up. And so the argument about creating U.S. jobs and production and all that holds less water with agriculture and food than with other items. So we don't see it happening. And quite frankly, if it could be grown and produced here, it would be. But those are some tree nuts, for example, just can't be grown here. There's not enough acreage for olives or olive oil. First time around with the Trump tariffs, they had an exclusion process, which there was no rhyme or reason to what was granted or what wasn't. And pine nuts, most of them come from China. And so several companies within our membership got together, filed for an exclusion for pine nuts, and it was rejected. Here you have the overwhelming majority of that coming from China. Yet there are other items that are produced, a lot here, and they got the exclusion. So there was no rhyme or reason to it. And if they do add an exclusion process this time around, we don't expect it to be any better.
Yeah. So pesto is getting affected on that one.
Exactly. Yeah. Pesto is a great example. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that sort of dovetails with the lobbying side of things and making your presence known at the very least. You're striking that balance. Then, as you said, you don't want to bolster a tariff argument potentially, but how do you approach it day by day, knowing that these things can change and that there is a lot of uncertainty in terms of what can be potentially exempted, what might not be, how much it goes up tomorrow versus the rolled back next week, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it requires constant monitoring of what's going on. Like, in fact, yesterday I was in the middle of conducting FSVP training and I got an alert on my phone about the pause in the tariffs. So I said, I gotta, let's take a break, 5 minutes so I can get it out to the members, that sort of thing. And constant. And I feel bad for any company that's relying on any imported items because the uncertainty. You don't know what your costs are going to be. And you don't know that when they're announced, it's really going to be fair because none of this reciprocal tariff is fair. I don't know how anybody can tell me if I'm an importer that I should have known that on April 2nd, it was going to be announced that on April 5th, 10% duty would go into effect from everywhere. So it's not like I could stockpile. I'd never get the financing to bring in all of these things that I need to beat that 10% tariff. And then it would cost me money, anyway. So it puts everybody in a tough spot. And, one of the arguments that we're going to make is we don't want to see what happened. The only time that I'm aware of that it happened was in an EU dispute during the last Trump administration. Tariffs were announced and there was no allowance made for goods that were already on the way here. Who pays those tariffs? U.S. companies. So they were hit in some cases with millions of dollars in tariffs. Mm-hmm. And they had no clue that these tariffs were going to be coming. So that was something that we reached out to members of Congress, we and other associations. We couldn't get something through Congress because we were looking to stop that from being able to happen again. I think we and others will, we're kind of waiting to see what Congress, because now there's talk amongst Congress about limiting the president's power with tariffs. And we're hoping that that sort of clause would be in there as well, that there always has to be an allowance. So we're kind of waiting to see. So we have, some law firms that keep us abreast of what's going on. We're in touch with other associations. And we'll, as soon as any of us see an opportunity or a potential issue, then we'll immediately, get everyone together and start, making the case known for why it shouldn't be or should be if it's something good.
Yeah. Well, we could probably talk about that part all day, but right. We'll move on. So getting back to the actual shipping process, obviously our podcast is called the Intermodal Logistics Podcast. So we, when we talk about coming through the ports, a lot of ports have rail right there. Are there some particular types of food products that are using intermodal a lot already, or others that you've seen kind of cycle through intermodal as an option?
Based on conversations with my members over the years, most of them, it's going to be trucked when it gets here. But there are a good number that are using rail as well. And I know a number of the ports have done a nice job of adding, better rail capability for stuff as it's leaving the port. And then the intermodal aspect also comes up in what you raised before. Whenever there's talk about either a port strike or anything like that, that's something that the importers look at, because if they're going to bring it into this port and then decide they're going to move it to another port, how's it getting to where the ultimate destination is?
Yeah.
So there's a pretty good mix, I think, within my membership. But I kind of like what I've seen in light, the increased capabilities for intermodal transportation. Yeah.
Yeah, and sort of following on that, I know sustainability is certainly something that people are paying attention to all along. It's something that is an important piece of business for everyone. So, when you're bringing stuff via ship, then the best way to do it sustainability wise is to incorporate some of that long haul rail if you can. So is that a conversation that you still hear amongst membership in terms of valuing sustainability and looking at options ongoing really to do it without raising costs?
I haven't heard a whole lot of discussion about it, to be quite frank. But just based on what I have heard and spoken with those members, it's one of those things where, because the margins in food are pretty slim, if they can do it at in a cost efficient way, they're going to do it. But it all does boil down to efficiency, not only in cost, but in just delivering the product. So when rail is an option, they're going to use that. As opposed to long haul trucking that isn't going to be as sustainable. But with the sustainability, with sustainability becoming even more of a buzzword and everything, everybody's starting to look at that, and then they can promote that as well. But it is tough sometimes with an imported product, because you already have the whole transport just to get here type of thing, particularly some of the food products coming from, far, far away.
Yeah. So when shipping food products, you mentioned the fluorescent lights are a problem for olive oil, for instance. What are some of the other factors that you worry about in bringing food in? Obviously temperatures can't get too extreme. I would assume. What are some other things there?
It'll be. I guess the two most common issues would be temperature control and pests. And, on the pest side, things have gotten a lot better, obviously. And so improvements there, both just in education of people because sometimes you bring stuff in from, a lesser developed country, and there's an education process in there, how to combat them, how to package and wrap and everything, get it here. So there's been a lot of improvement there. But I know, for example, somebody in one of the trainings I was doing, one of the things we talk about is, things to consider about reevaluating your supplier. And it was during the shipping thing. And she said, maybe with my stuff sitting there, pests are becoming more of an issue. It's something I had to go back and look at. So, that's one area of things. But then the temperature control, because now we're talking about a food safety issue in many cases. Sometimes it is just quality. But with the technology getting better now and the temperature recordings being available, in fact, if a product has a temperature need from a food safety perspective, and I'm an importer, I really have no other option than to get the temperature recordings, because that's FDA is going to tell me it needs it, and it does, because I have to be able to demonstrate the temperature was maintained. So Yeah, that's a primary thing. Anything that's refrigerated or frozen or with any kind of temperature need. And thankfully that the technology is better. I spoke to a group of smaller trucking companies in 2017 because it's when FISMA was coming into play. I mentioned the need for it, and it was kind of like a deer in headlights kind of look from a lot of people in the room. They're like, we can't do this yet.
Yeah.
And then a year or so later, I spoke for the group again, and things have gotten better. The pricing came down, and they were able to do it. So,
So back to Washington. Are there any other pieces of legislation that you're looking at outside of the tariff discussion right now? Anything that you see coming in the coming year that could impact your industry in particular?
There could be. We don't have enough feel yet for what's going to happen in terms of with Secretary Kennedy and some of the things that he might put or look to put through with Food and Drug Administration. So it's another thing we have to monitor closely. We're certainly not against legislation in general, but it's got to make sense, kind of thing. It's got to be science based and that sort of thing. So we'll definitely look, and if something comes up along those lines, then we have to determine, what our stance is going to be and how aggressive. And one good thing about the food industry groups in general is that we all work together pretty well. So FSMA is another great example. We had a very large coalition, and we would get together, and if it was the produce safety rule, the produce people would take the lead. When it was imports, they all turned to me and said, what do you think it is? So there's a history of us working together, and that'll continue. But again, like the tariffs, it's kind of a wait and see kind of approach to see what is put out there. There's one right now, front of pack labeling kind of a proposal that's out there, and it would. A lot of us don't really care for it because it's 3 or 4 components that would have to go on the front of a label that are already in the back of the label. Mm-hmm. There's limited space, and we don't really see the value of it. So that could be one of the first things that we and others in the industry have to work upon.
So you mentioned industry collaboration. Good segue into your upcoming convention. So tell us a little bit about your annual convention. What's sort of front of mind there? What you're planning to cover, and the actual nitty gritty details, where it is, when it is, and how people can get involved.
No, great, man. We're very excited about it. The program is really. Even stronger than ours typically is. So it's going to be April 24th to 26th at the Hyatt Centric in Fort Lauderdale in the Las Olas section, which happens to be a foodie area. So another good reason for us to be there. But we have a few components that are really good, including 4 experts who are going to talk about a lot of what we just talked about, tariffs and trade, regulations, and supply chain issues. And so they'll each talk about those particular things, and then we'll have an open discussion with those 4 and the attendees. And these are, like I said, they're experts. They live and breathe this kind of thing. So they're going to have not only the latest information that's already been put out there, but information they've gleaned from their contacts behind the scenes and from one another. So from an information standpoint, the people who are in the room for that presentation are going to be miles ahead of those who aren't. So we're excited about that one. And then our keynote speaker is going to talk about artificial intelligence in the food industry. with a lot of specifics for imported foods, but it will also cover, so anybody in the food sector, and quite frankly, in any kind of company would benefit from it. So it's Severin Sorensen, who's known as the AI whisperer. And I was on a plane a couple of weeks ago, and my wife was chatting up with a woman, and it turns out she's an AI professor. I think it was at Stanford. And so I said, "Well, do you know Severin Sorensen?" And she goes, "Well, everybody knows him. Anybody who's in AI." So we're really excited about his presentation. And then we also have Scott Clemens from Brown Brothers Harriman, who's a sought-after speaker on the economy and markets. And with everything that's going on right now, I can't think of a more timely discussion. And Scott has a great way of delivering the information. So the program is great. And I always find it beneficial to be in the same room as people who do what I do.
Yeah.
And that's another, great reason, whether it's our convention or any other convention, the stuff that you talk about, even if it's just commiserating and complaining at one another, but a lot of times you can pick up good information from others in the room as well as the speakers. So yeah, we're really getting, we're excited about it. And, getting down to Florida in April, good for some of us who are still dealing with some cold weather up here in New Jersey and other places too.
Yeah, we actually had a few snow flurries yesterday here, and I think you had some stuff like that too recently, right? Yeah,
we did not too long ago. Yes. Yeah.
Tell people where they can learn more about the convention and your organization in general.
All right, definitely. www.afius.org, and that'll give you further information about the association in general, and specifics about the convention, and some of the other things that we do, including the FSVP training and other ways that we can help anybody with any kind of connection to the food import sector.
Great, Bob. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us.
Oh, my pleasure, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again for joining us for this edition of the Intermodal Logistics Podcast. And again, a thank you to Bob Bauer with AFI for taking the time to give us some insights on food imports, tariffs. Those two things are intertwined right now, and very interesting to hear from somebody who's dealing with it on the ground. So if you'd like to learn more about AFI, again, you can find the link in the description, and that's also where you can find more about their upcoming convention. Please do subscribe or follow however you get this podcast. We are happy to get any ratings and reviews as well, and comments with questions, or if you'd like to ask us a question that you want to sort of take offline, feel free to email us at podcast@intechlogistics.com. And you can find more about Intech Logistics on our website, www.intechlogistics.com as well. Thanks again for joining us for this edition. I'm Kevin Baxter, and we will be back very soon with another episode.